Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Parent, and I'm the CEO of Court Square Group. And this is the podcast, Driving the Business of Science. And the reason I put this podcast together is because I think there's so many other aspects of science, life science, that um, people don't think about. People think about scientists and putting things together. And in our world, we're in the life science field, pharmaceutical, biotech, med device. And there's so many other aspects to it. And I meet so many interesting people in the course of my job that I thought it would be important to bring those people to the podcast and talk about what they do and how we can kind of pull some of that stuff together. So today we have a very interesting guest on. His name is Peter Reinhart, and he's the director of the Institute of Applied Life Sciences at UMass Amherst. And I'm looking forward to having him. And let me tell you a little bit more about Court Square before we go there. Court Square is a managed service firm. We manage infrastructure for life science companies, pharmaceutical, biotech, med device. We have what we call ARC. It's an audit-ready compliant cloud. And we could host any application all the way from preclinical through manufacturing, as well as a content repository called RegDocs 365, which hosts any type of clinical or regulatory content. We have a TMF and ADM reference model, as well as what we call life science launchpad to help companies get off the ground and stay regulatory compliant with a governance plan and get them going so they can scale as a company. With that being said, let's get into the meat of the matter. And I'd like to introduce Peter. Peter Reinhart, again, is the director of the Institute of Applied Life Science, as well as he can go into his background as a professor as well. Peter, turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks for the invitation. And of course, we've known each other for a while, being on a few boards together. But by way of background, I started my career as a traditional researcher. My first faculty position was at Duke Medical Center, working on neurological disorders, particularly Huntington's and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. I was bitten by the bug to create a startup company. So together with two colleagues, we created our first startup, Cogent Neuroscience was the first startup in Research Triangle Park down in North Carolina. We grew that company to a reasonable size, ended up selling it, and then ended up taking a position at, I actually left Duke Medical School and decided to continue the development path for some of the therapeutics we were working on, particularly around Alzheimer's. So I was recruited to Wyeth Pharmaceuticals in Princeton, New Jersey, where I became therapeutic area head in the neuro-D space and developed a number of therapeutics, including the first antibody for Alzheimer's disease that was put into 3,000 patients in a phase 3 clinical trial. Developed a number of therapeutics and devices there. The whole company ended up being purchased by Pfizer, so I became a Pfizer employee, stayed there for another year or so, and then joined another startup in Boston, Proteostasis Therapeutics, that we raised quite a lot of money for to develop, again, therapeutics for some of these diseases, in this case, particularly Parkinson's disease and also cystic fibrosis. So we ended up selling that company, and at that point, I was recruited to UMass Amherst, and that's where I am right now, heading up this translational incubator that tries to facilitate the development of a lot of the good ideas that come off the campus that are often written up in journals or become part of PhD theses, but aren't continued to be developed as potential products that people can use. And so the previous chancellor decided he was going to create an institute. He asked me to be the founding director, and our mission is to catalyze the movement of good ideas that are born on the campus with the idea of developing them into product candidates that the rest of the world can take advantage of. So that's a little bit about my trajectory and background in a nutshell. As you can see, I've spent time in academia, I've spent time in biotech, I've spent time in large pharma and learned a little bit about what it takes to develop products in each of those three contexts.
Well, when I talk about the business of science, you really have been all of it. You're a scientist, but now you've been in the whole business aspect of it. And as Peter alluded to earlier, he and I both serve on the board of HistoSpring, which previously was known as Pioneer Valley Life Science Institute, which is a translational research institute, joint venture between UMass Amherst and Bay State Medical. And earlier, I had actually Dr. Joe Jerry on an earlier podcast talking about his background and all the stuff they're doing at Histo Springs. So it's great that I have Peter on here too, because we're actually we're trying to figure out how do we kind of connect the dots across many of these different areas and bring things together. How about talking a little bit about how we started, how IELTS started, Peter, and some of the work that you guys did with the Mass Life Science Center?
Yeah, it was actually one of these cases of starting with a bang, not a whimper. In part because we started the institute largely in response to a very large award that the Mass Life Science Center made to the campus. This was a $95 million award to develop a more translational capacity in Western Massachusetts, particularly on the UMass Amherst campus. So the reason I'm on this program, the reason I'm at UMass is largely due to this investment made by the Mass Life Science Center. Anyone that ever comes and visits us will see a very large MLSC plaque in our building because it truly was the catalytic event that allowed this institute to start. I should say the campus also contributed significantly in the form of a fairly major, very modern new building. And so we're now lucky enough to have all of the translational activities on our campus be headquartered in a single building as a combination of contributions from the Mass Life Science Center and from the UMass Amherst campus. So that
Well,
was
I have to say, Peter, I've been on campus a number of times. I've been at a number of different events at IELTS, and I will tell you that the building that you guys are in is absolutely fantastic. I think that I went to a couple meetings there, a couple presentations where you were working with some of the entrepreneurs on campus and trying to show them things about entrepreneurship. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity and something that Western Mass, people don't think about Western Mass when they think about some of these things, and they don't understand how much we do have out there. And I think some of the stuff that's happening at UMass Amherst, it's amazing some of the work that you guys are doing. And talk a little bit more about where you're going and what's happening with some of the companies and even maybe some of the structure, because I know that there's a lot of kind of anchor companies that kind of invest in some of those companies that are there.
Yeah, it's a really interesting environment that's being built out here. We, as we've just alluded to already, we're lucky enough to be in this building that has space that's very unusual for an academic campus in that we have these large lab spaces. We're not an individual investigator or an individual department owns that space, but it's actually a collection of investigators that come from many different groups around a particular idea. I have one group that's working on protein misfolding diseases like cystic fibrosis. We have faculty from chemistry, from molecular biology. We have other faculty from engineering and nursing. And what unifies them is this single idea that they want to develop an idea that solves one of the unmet problems, that society has right now. So very, very different building. The building has a number of unique aspects to it. We have a lot of equipment facilities. The campus invested very heavily in making sure that if a group of inventors, both on and off campus, have a good idea, they aren't stuck because they don't have the right piece of instrument that they need, like a 3D printer, or to do X-ray crystallography, or to do nano printing, for instance. One of the most recent printers we installed prints at a nanoscale. So, for instance, you can print microneedles that can inject substances in you with no pain at all because they're nanoneedles, microneedles. So we have these equipment facilities. We have some other spaces that are quite unique in that we have company startup spaces. And you might say, well, why is that unique? Lots of places have company startup spaces. It's pretty unique to be able to launch a company on an academic campus while retaining full ownership of all of your intellectual property. And that is true whether you come from a lab that's on the UMass Amherst campus or if you come from outside. We have a number of companies that we have incubated that came to us from the outside were able to grow, able to retain their intellectual property, They're now successful companies that have taken up large amounts of space in Western Massachusetts. So in a way, it's an infrastructure that allows us to incubate and grow companies in the region without needing to go to Boston, Cambridge, or the Seaport District. You can actually do it in Western Mass, and you can grow your companies here. So a lot of the space and the way the building is organized is all allowing this to happen as an ecosystem.
Now, if we only had a high-speed train between the Boston area and Amherst, we could actually have some of those workers coming out to us in a relatively quick fashion. But that's another podcast in the future. I do have an interesting question for you because I know that you and I have had a conversation before about some of the things that the campus does, and one of the things that I remember was, I believe it's the Eisenberg School has a kind of a cross working relationship with IELTS. Tell me a little bit about that and how that works.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. We realized early on that as we start creating these startup companies and we have, really smart people that know how to drive the technology, what is often missing in these early startups is the business expertise. What actually is the business model? How is this really going to turn into a business? So I realized the best place to get that is at the business school. So I had a discussion with the then dean of the business school, and I said, look, we're training great entrepreneurs that know the technical aspects. You're training great business students that are going to be the next generation CEOs, COOs, CFOs. What if we gave these students an opportunity to create virtual startup companies while still on campus? And so in a 30-minute discussion, he just reached across the table, shook my hand, and said, "We're doing this." And since then, that was now 8 years ago, we've had these startup teams that we create without needing to raise $1 million and find lab space somewhere. These are virtual teams, but they have both business expertise from our business school and then a technical expertise from our startup founders. We bring them together and allow them to create this startup idea that pressure tests the idea, tries to work out whether there's a differentiated model here, whether this could be a business. And so now we attack both the science or the technology and the business side of things all in this virtual environment. And it's worked fantastic. We've now got 40 to 50 startup companies in our portfolio, nearly all of them driven by this combination of MBA students plus inventors.
How do people hear about that, or what kind of PR are you guys doing around kind of that explosion of companies that are coming out of Western Mass? I know everybody talks about Boston, talks about what happens in Cambridge and all that kind of stuff, but it sounds fantastic that we're able to do that out of Western Mass. How are we getting that word out?
It's difficult. Frankly, this podcast is one of the ways we're getting the word out. But against the very high level and volume of news flow from Boston, Cambridge, Seaport District, it's hard for Western Massachusetts to actually effectively market what we have here. All I can say is whenever we physically walk anyone through the building, no matter where they come from, Boston or international or other cities, usually the comment we get is, "I had no idea this is going on in Western Mass." So it is impressive in terms of the resources and infrastructure that's been put into this. It is difficult for us to get the word out. If any one of your listeners has any interest in learning more about it, I give tours through our building and little introductory, summaries of what we do here just about every single week that I've been here. So we love to have people come and visit us. And I have to say that of all the marketing ploys that we've tried, on the web and in media, print media, TV, radio, the thing that's worked best for us is to physically invite people onto the campus and have them walk through the building.
Having done that and seen what you guys have, I can understand that because it is amazingly impressive. And I do think that, more companies that have established Eastern Mass things could look at the cost differential in Western Mass and what you do. So when we talk about the business of science, when you think about it, what is one of those things that you think about from the business perspective? One is getting the right talent to do things. We talk about the hook in with the Eisenberg School to put things together, because I can tell you point blank, I've dealt with a lot of startup companies that when you get scientists that are trying to run a company and they have no clue how to run a company, it can be disastrous. And
Yeah.
so the fact that you guys are taking that bull by the horns, I think is fantastic. But then the other side is the cost aspect of things.
Yeah.
And if you're going to raise money and you're going to try to get a startup off the ground, why not try to look at minimizing your burn rate when you're first starting and using a lower cost environment to be able to help do some of that stuff? Tell me a little bit more about how do the rest of the campus, the students, get involved? Are they all from the science aspect of things? Are they recruited by the startup companies that are in there? How does that work with the students? Or are there actual classes that go on with any of this?
Yeah, it's all of the above. Increasingly, we now have classes specifically focused on entrepreneurship and innovation. Um, there's a whole infrastructure that's currently being built out of the provost's office to really beef up the training that our undergraduates can get, as well as graduate students and postdocs. The other thing I should add is, although we're developing a lot of capacity for our students, um, startup companies that are out there already that may not have a campus affiliation are just as welcome to use our resources as any company that's being launched on campus. So we have many small companies in Western Mass that are exploring a new product idea or an adjacency to a product they're currently developing. They don't have the R&D budget to invest a few $1 million in equipment and infrastructure to test out their idea, but they do come onto our campus and test the idea out for an hour, 2 hours at a time. We give them access to equipment facilities, and it becomes a very cost-effective way to try new ideas. And frankly, it gives Massachusetts companies a competitive advantage. We have 70 or $80 million worth of cutting-edge equipment sitting on our campus with experts running it that any outside company, no matter how small, can access, as well as all of the startup companies that we're creating on campus. And of course, our students have a lot more opportunities other than educational to participate in this academic industry relationship. We bring internship students in over the summer. We let them work for 10 weeks on industry related projects in our equipment facilities to give them a taste of what it's like to work on a project that has a timeline, a fixed timeline attached to it, and has a fixed outcome that somebody is aiming for. So this is not a research project. It truly is an industry sponsored project, usually addressing some big unmet need.
Well, I can remember being out on one of the tours that I was out on and seeing a room, and I think it was it was a climate controlled room or it was something like that, where I think one of the major sports manufacturers for sportswear was doing something about, I don't know how much sweat you make or doing something like that. And I thought there was, wow, what an interesting concept that they were doing. So, I wouldn't have necessarily thought that was life science, but if you think about sweat wicking and doing all that kind of stuff with clothing, I guess it falls right in line with that. So I thought that was really incredible when you did stuff like that. And I think it translated right into other issues from a medical perspective and things like that. Tell us a little bit about some of those uniqueness.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is two facilities that I walked you by. One of them is our roll-to-roll fabrication facility. This is where we can build devices that actually have a flexible form factor. Think like a Band-Aid. This is where we can collect sweat from your skin. We can analyze what proteins or peptides are in the skin, and we can say a lot about what you're currently going through. The specific development that was being done when you walked by there was to develop a stress sensor that can tell whether an operator is stressed or not. If you think about people manning really responsible positions and making life or death choices, it'd be good to know that their stress levels are not so high that they aren't able to make good decisions anymore. So this is a wearable stress sensor. One of our equipment facilities allows us to fabricate those. The other facility that you're talking about is set up like an apartment complex. It has bedrooms, living room, kitchen, dining area, TV room. You can live in there, and it is an apartment complex that can test many different parameters around your performance. And the specific one you are mentioning is we have one of those rooms set up to measure how much energy you're burning. So minute by minute, hour by hour, it can tell you whether you're at rest or at sleep or on an exercise bike, exactly how many calories you're burning. And so there are apparel manufacturers that want to build next generation electronics directly into the material. Like think t-shirts that as you're running, the arm of your t-shirt could be flashing up how many calories you're burning. It's not an electronic device that you're wearing. It's not a device at all. It's electronics that are built into the actual fabric of the t-shirt that can measure how much energy you're burning and read it back out to you. So these are some of the next generation devices that are being developed by a number of companies in the area.
That is absolutely amazing. I didn't even realize some of the things you were working on. So I'm hoping that this goes wide and a lot of people see this because I think it's fantastic to be able to just illustrate some of the things that we can do right in Amherst and right with the campus. I think that's fantastic. How about from a course perspective? How do the courses kind of tie in with it?
Well, we have a number of specific numbered courses that count as degree courses that teach people not the technical aspects of their skills, not how to be a better chemist or be a better microbiologist, but actually teach them the skills and information you need around creating a startup company. So there are a number of courses around that, and then beyond that, we have a number of specific offerings that, again, anyone could participate in, whether you're a student or a faculty member, or you're just an interested, individual from off campus. We offer these hour-long sessions that explore particular aspects, such as what does it take to develop a wearable device that reads out a particular piece of medical data? What does it take to A, build the device, and B, what sort of regulatory pathway do you have to, what sort of clearances and certificates do you need to be able to market that? Then we have much simpler courses as well that just teach you about, well, what does it take to register a startup company? How do you even do that? What's the advantage of doing that? How do you think about licensing and taking intellectual properties? These are all new skills that 50 years ago people didn't really have to worry about very much. But now, in this era of a lot of people thinking about how to translate good ideas they have into something that the rest of the world can participate in, we need a new skill set beyond just technical expertise in your chosen area. We need this general knowledge on what it takes to actually translate a good idea into a possible product.
Well, and I know on the campus, you guys between all the different schools that you've got, we talked about the Eisenberg School, but I also know that you've got the Conti Center that works on different kind of, was it fabrics or different kind of,
Materials,
they did the Gex skin or something like that. So there's lots of things that UMass Amherst campus can do, and it just seems like there could be so many ways that different areas within the campus can work together and bringing it all together in that whole translational concept and into working companies. It's fascinating, and I think that drives home the concept of driving the business of science. With that being said, Peter, how about we're coming up on time. I'd love to have some last few thoughts from you about how we can really kind of get the word out about this, or anything that you want to talk about IELTS. I'd love to hear more.
Yeah, for me, I think this is a really interesting moment in time where it seems like we're just starting to tip that balance between truly being able to create startup companies in Western Massachusetts and grow them in Western Massachusetts. And that's one of the things I'm really interested in. I love helping ideas not just be born, but seeing them to develop to the point where lots of other people can take advantage of that outcome. Massachusetts is a leader in knowing how to do this. But when we say Massachusetts, until very recently, we really meant Boston, Cambridge, and the Seaport District. And of course, they are a hub of that knowledge and that translational capacity. But I think increasingly it is being spread more broadly throughout Massachusetts. We're located in Western Mass, and we're increasingly building capacity and tools that allow companies to be born here and to grow here. And there are many advantages in terms of quality of life, in terms of affordability of growing a company. My previous company, I grew in the middle of Cambridge, and it cost well over $1 million a year in rent that we were paying. we would have had the equivalent space in Western Massachusetts at a fraction of that cost, which means a lot of that $1 million of venture capital that we raised could have been used towards product development and not just paying rent. And so there are some real advantages to growing companies in our region. And increasingly, we have the capacity to do that.
Well, that's fantastic. And for anybody that hasn't been on the UMass Amherst campus in a long time, you would not recognize it. I go on campus a lot. My wife and I are season ticket holders to football and to hockey. We're always on there. We're going to a hockey game tomorrow night against UConn. Go UMass. But the reality is, I think that to see what you guys have done at IELTS, I am so happy that you were able to join us today, Peter. And I'm so glad that we were able to get this out there. Maybe we should maybe after this we can actually put up a thing that says where you are and all that kind of stuff, so people can have a link to this. Or you want to just say the URL now? So is there a simple URL or is it a very long one? Is it IELTS?
It's pretty simple. It's umass.edu/IALS, IELTS, Institute for Applied Life Sciences. You'll get through to somebody here. And, it's not just a sort of a random offer. We really mean if you truly want to spend half an hour, walking through and seeing some of these emerging technologies and capacities, we'll gladly give you a tour through our building.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Peter. This has been a wonderful opportunity to hear a lot about what you offer and what UMass has to offer. So I thank you very much for your time this afternoon. For everybody else out there, thank you very much for, again, tuning into the Driving the Business of Science podcast. And I look forward to our next podcast. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.